guys. How are you? How are you? How are you? I if you got on here right away, you probably saw me. And then I went away again. For some reason my little music was being volume's low. Okay. Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. All of the different volume things on my computer. Did that help? And yes, please, Druid, spill your beans. I want to know. I love everybody's news. I hope it's good. When you say announcement, that sounds like a good thing. So, how many pairs of glasses do I have? A lot. But today I need to see well, and these are bifocals. So, I don't know why. I change nothing about my setup, right? Like, absolutely nothing. And from day to day, it's like, meh, technology decides what it wants to do. So, you're sewing! Oh my gosh, that is the best news ever. Please take pictures. Please share. I mean, it's okay if you don't want to share on here, but of course, I require a look at this. I want to see what you're going to be making. I'm so excited. Yeah. No pics. Ma'am, I need to see pictures. That is so great. I'm so glad to hear that. I think it's wonderful to start 2024 off with, something to be excited about. That is awesome. So today I was like, oh, come on, girl. It's going to be good, even if it is rough. Getting back into something, you'll find the flow. I'm confident, and I'm super happy for you. Yeah, of course not. Yeah. Okay, if it's personal. Yeah, I know that you do like some personal stuff through artwork, so I understand if it's too personal to show. But okay. This is interesting. Maybe you can describe what you're doing and maybe leave out some of the personal stuff. I love that. I think you are going to love what I have to show today. All of you. Let me just say, hold on to your butts. You guys are going to absolutely love what I have to show you today. So yes, we're starting this stream off very well. So exciting. Picking up the pieces. Oh, I like that already. That sounds good. Yay! Do I have I'm trying to see, do I have an emote for this? Tim, thank you. Oh my gosh. A hype train. You guys. That was so exciting. And a hype train. I've never had a hype train before. We used to have them a lot over on Quilt Nerd, but anyway, that's exciting. You guys, you're the best. Jill, I did not, because I was playing that starting soon with my discount thing. It didn't show your little thing, so I'll have to play that later. I'm sad when I can see it on my side and you guys can't see it because I'm playing a different thing for you guys. So, let me say hi to everybody. Jeez, for goodness sakes. Robin's here, yay! Of course. Jill gifted subs. Oh my gosh. And I see. Holy moly, you guys. This has never happened. And I see some of the folks who just got, you guys get the sewing kit and win their gifts. Yeah, thank you, Jill. You are the best. Let me see who got them because I see some names of people I know who got subs. So SK South 2, the Sapphire Peach, Jan Make Stuff, Venice D. Oh, it's Venice. That's my bestie in Indiana. And Fandor, hey! I didn't know that you were here lurking. It is so good to see you guys, and I'm so excited that you have, you can use the emotes, you get to skip commercials now. So very excited by that. Thank you again, Jill. That's pretty awesome. And I got a hype trade. So yeah. So super awesome news that Druid had to share. And then Robin is here. The modern version of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yes, it's called Cowboy's Lament. And because I keep getting the mutes from was it Pixabay or Pixelbay? For whatever reason, there's something in their little royalty-free music that Twitch keeps like muting. And I'm not getting copyright strikes. They're just muting like a minute. And I hate that when people come and look at a video and they're like, oh, something's muted. This person is, and I don't like that. So I want our videos to be, all audio. So I've gone back and digging through my my files to find some music that I absolutely 100% know is royalty free and nobody's coming after me. Because maybe not that cowboy one, but I have some in my files that are literally recorded off of like old wax records and are like long ago became part of the public domain. So you guys will get to hear some of that coming up. Let's see. So Jill's here. Yay! And your butt is being held. Maro Dim, my dearest. Mod Art Quilt. Ah! Kellen, hello. It's a banner day on Cake TV. So excited. So let me go through all the things in the stuff, and then you guys are going to see some incredible stuff from Elizabeth Talford Scott. And if I could have just put my arms around the show and brought it home, I would have, because we'll get to the whole story in a minute, but they did such a fantastic job. There was only probably 2 things about the show that were kind of a bummer, and like I hate to even say these 2 things because the show is incredible. Tonight, I'm going to an event at one of the other museums that is tied in with this show. So I'll get pictures of that. That one is specific to crazy quilts. Although I would not call Elizabeth Talford Scott's work crazy quilts. I think people that maybe are not knowledgeable about her might look at some of her quilts and say like, oh, that looks like a crazy quilt, or it has elements of crazy quilt. But her quilts are most definitely story quilts. So we will look at those in a second. But let me get all of the quote unquote housekeeping out of the way. So as you guys saw, I was in, it's not so much 2 museum events in 24 hours. Yeah, just about 36 hours. So you guys saw I was shilling my t-shirts because, Cake wants to bring you more of this and parking costs. So I'm out there shilling stuff again. So you guys saw my little bit.ly. I'm putting it in there for you to and guys, those of you that come live are, I know not everybody can watch live. I'm by no means am I throwing shade at anybody who can't watch live, because people have lives, people have jobs, all that stuff. But sometimes people are watching that are not part of the the OG quilt nerds, and I want to make sure that like they're in on the party too. Like, so a lot of times when I'm out here shilling, it's not necessarily for you guys, although of course I want you to have shirts and stuff if you want them, but it's more about the people that are casual watchers. I want to pull them into our family a little more. So that's what some of the some of that is about. And since Jill is here, Jill and I are doing quilt nerding, and we're kind of doing it sort of started as a book club, and we're doing some other stuff along with it, like some experimental archaeology type stuff, and We don't know what that's going to eventually evolve into, but excuse me, we would love you to participate if you're not already participating. I know a bunch of people here are participating. So again, this is not necessarily a message for my lives and lurkers, but for folks that get to see this later and maybe don't know a whole lot about us and what we do. So that's the Instagram link. And then the AQSG winter seminar is coming up, and I know I want to say at least one of my cakelets told me that they have already signed up. And it's been open to non-members, so if, like, you don't have to be a member of AQSG to sign up for this winter study center. It's all virtual, but the keynote speaker is Teresa Jarye Wong, so she's amazing. And then I'm going to be redoing my Dr. Dunton presentation. So that will be out there. So I'm going to put the link in here. So if you could check it out if you want to. Oh, and Stream Elements, excuse me, Stream Elements is shilling HelloFresh right now, which I stand behind and support. I do love the HelloFresh. But if you have some change in your pocket, please buy my t-shirts before you buy a HelloFresh subscription. You know, if I'm going to be shilling over here. All right. So I think that's all the stuff. Jill, did I miss anything? Because I know we've been in touch a whole bunch this week about stuff. We've got lots of stuff going on with AQSG and interesting things. I don't know if anybody who's here live right now is going to QuiltCon, but if you are, I will be at the AQSG booth in like the expo thing. If you've never been to QuiltCon, not only is it a whole bunch of classes, but also there's an enormous quilt show, then specialty quilt shows, and then, then this giant expo. So if it's your first time at QuiltCon, you want to be able to be found. When in doubt, come to the AQSG booth. And if I'm not there, somebody of a quilt nerdy background will be there. The point being, at QuiltCon, I'm hoping that all of us who are online friends who didn't meet up last year. I didn't go to QuiltCon last year, but some of the nerdy folks here did meet up last year. So we want to do that again. So Mod Art. Well, you'll be there in spirit, and excuse me, my voice is really froggy today. I will be doing some pop-ups that week. I'm going to have to change the schedule that week, and I'll tell you more about that as we get closer. But I say as we get closer, it is close. It's only like in a few weeks. But anyway, I'll do pop-ups. So, excuse me. If you're going to be there at QuiltCon and you want to join me for a pop-up, I'll give you information about it. I know I did at least one pop-up at seminar, AQSG seminar, and everyone was a little like, but then when I started it, everybody had fun. So we could do another that, like, a cake party. So yes, Robin, thank you. Hey, Megan. All right. Okay, let's get to it. I know you guys are looking forward to this. Let me get my pictures up. Okay, so I am going to take you through exactly how I saw this show. So my son was with me. We actually visited some other stuff in the museum first. And I gotta say, like, the Baltimore Museum of Art is an enormous buildings. It's a campus, essentially. It's near Johns Hopkins University. It's in an area where there's multiple other museums. And so it's a nice little area. And, but it's a lot of walking. And so we went in and my son was like, oh, look, that's the thing we're going to, right? It was up on one of the screen things right in the lobby. And I was like, yeah, but it's upstairs. Let's walk through some of the permanent collection stuff first. So I have all those pictures. So I will do those another time if you guys are interested. There's, there's a few textile things, but for the most part, the stuff I took pictures of yesterday was like the African masks in their permanent collection, some of the contemporary art that's new that I hadn't seen. So anyway, I'll share those another time, but they're also very awesome. So, oh, and by the way, today is February 1st. And I'm a dummy. I thought today was Groundhog Day. That's February 2nd. But February 1st is the start of Black History Month here in the United States. And so, Baltimore Museum of Art has a lot going on right now in terms of Black history. And also where I'm going tonight does too. So I'm hoping to get pictures of tonight as well, because these are, great things to look at for Black History Month. Although we should look at these things all year round and not just for 1 month of the year, but any event. So by the time I get to the exhibit, we've walked a lot, but it was kind of in this upstairs part of this contemporary wing, and it was a little hard to find. I'll be honest. I had to ask, like, where is it? And, I guess I was kind of feeling indignant because I sort of felt like her stuff should be like right in the front. So anyway, this is like the first little placard that you see when you go. There's like 2 stairways that go up, and you kind of go up one and then down the other. So this was like at the beginning. And these 2 quilts down here are inspired by her work. They were not there, but they are 2 other makers that were inspired by. And then there was some, they have QR codes for everything that you can go to. So I will share these later, but it's Joan Gaither and Glenda Richardson. And I don't personally know Glenda, but I know who she is, and I've met her before. So they are local area art. Well, I think Glenda is. I don't know. I'm not sure about Joan Gaither, if she's local or not. But in any event, it is so abundantly obvious that Elizabeth Talford Scott, or they call her Miss Liz, Miss Lizzie, Mama Lizzie. She very much inspired a lot of quilters in the Baltimore area and beyond, obviously. But I'm going to show you the other side of this quilt. And hopefully, I want to say it's next week marks like the middle of the show. This particular quilt is a 2-sided quilt, and they have it currently turned, showing one side, and this is the other side of it that we can't see right now, but hopefully I can go back and take the picture of it. And so that's what that looks like. And then this is standing down below the exhibit. This is before I went up the stairs. And I will explain what Eyewinkers, Tumbleturds, and Candlebugs are, because that was the name of the original show as well as this one. And I was like, what does this mean? And I'll tell you in a minute. So this is the quilt. This is the 2-sided quilt. And it says it's her biggest quilt that she ever made. And just standing where I was, it was really hard to judge the size of it because it was up pretty high. This was like, imagine standing like, ground level, and you're looking up at something that is like on a second story, and a second story that has like tall ceilings. So we're talking like the bottom of the quilt was probably at least 14, 15 feet above me. So size is always, confusing in my opinion. So it's hard to tell, but apparently this is not significantly, but bigger than the other stuff. And there were 2 quilts in the show that you'll see in a minute. I really thought they were about the same size as this. So maybe it's a matter of like just inches, but it was hard to tell exactly how big this quilt was. But this is an interesting one. This one's a little bit different than the other ones, the ones that were in the main gallery. I would say this one is more Spartan. I would not describe Elizabeth's work or Lizzie's work as Spartan, because it's not. But this particular one is probably the most Spartan of her quilts. And all of these pieces are just, she collected things and included them. And I think some are pieces that she stitched on and then included. Like this Dresden plate, I don't know. I don't know if it was a found piece or a piece that she did herself and then it included. Now her background, and I'll actually read the placards to you. She had a background in just regular old quilting. she learned quilting as a child. And we don't see any of that because we see her artwork. Um, you call each other Tumbleturds. Well, when you find out what a Tumbleturd is, you may not want to call each other that. Okay, so I did a little bit of photo correction on this one so that you can see it. This is an iconic photograph of Elizabeth Talford Scott. This is, I mean, like if you look her up, this is the picture that comes up. And this is really cool. The artist, unfortunately, when I did, there was a thing up here about the artist that when I color or brightness corrected this, it took it away. But essentially, this is a three-dimensional like carving of the picture. Like I can't even describe what this is. When you touch, and the instructions say touch it, and when you touch it, it's got this like I mean, it's tactile, and you could feel like around her shirt where it's light colored was a lot thinner, whereas like, you know, up in her hair and on her face, the plastic was thicker. And I don't know what this process is called, but it was, I mean, essentially it was plastic. But the way that, I don't know, I mean, it must be some kind of 3D engraving or something. But anyway, I'm like just blown away because again, this is a really iconic picture, and then to see it like you could touch it and stuff, it was wild. And I think it was really cool that they did this because when we get to the quilts are something people want to touch. Cake and the Tumbleturds, yes, this will be our band name. All right, so here's her origin story. I'm going to go ahead and read this. I won't read the longer stuff, but I will read this one completely. So this is her origin story. One of 14 children, Elizabeth Talford Scott grew up on Blackstock Plantation in South Carolina. Born only 2 generations after the legal end of slavery in the United States, she lived with her parents, Samuel and Mary Jane Caldwell, in a house built by her grandfather, who had been born into slavery. So, I mean, she's the second generation after emancipation, essentially. When she was 9, she learned the art of piecing cloth from her mother. She worked alongside adults and children to create quilts that could be bartered for fabric, food staples, and services in an economically impoverished but culturally and spiritually rich community. Now, my grandmother, not African American, but her upbringing in a little bit west of where Elizabeth Talford Scott was born was very similar. I mean, we're talking about in, South Carolina, back in the early 20th century was, still pretty rural, and, a lot of folks were farmers there. And, after the Great Depression, really impacted like the entire population of South Carolina. And you can imagine people that were sharecroppers and tenant farmers, they're coming out of a couple generations outside of enslavement, and then they're hit with the Great Depression. So Elizabeth Talford Scott's upbringing was probably like pretty rough, just by virtue of the fact that a lot of these rural citizens of South Carolina were poor as poop. And on top of that, she was African American. So that like doubles the situation. Settling in Baltimore in the early 1940s as part of the Great Migration, Talford Scott's time for quilting was limited due to her work as a caterer, childcare provider, and mother. She was actually a domestic when she first arrived in Baltimore. She got work as, help, housemaid kind of thing. After her retirement in the mid-1970s, she developed a new style of quilting, expanding on her family traditions. She eventually gained national renown for her singular hand-sewn quilts that portray community stories, social wisdom, and her family's sharecropping history. The Baltimore Museum of Art's Plantation is paired in conversation with Delaware Art Museum's Grandfather Cabin / Noah's Ark, which we'll also look at. Both works in different ways chronicle the artist's origin story. And so this is Plantation. And what was really cool is they have these quotes from her. And some of these quotes are from video footage they took from the original version of the show. The original version of the show was 25 years ago. And it was curated by a man named George Siskel. And he came back as a curator emeritus from the Maryland Institute College of Art to help a group of students recurate the show. So it's really interesting. It's, the same kind of collection of quilts. I think some of the quilts may be different than the original show, but for the most part, it's these same quilts. And the way that they've presented them is different. Unfortunately, at a little bit of a loss for how it's different, because, and I'll tell you why. I didn't get the exhibition catalog, and so that's one place I'm a little bit stumped right now on how to explain the differences between the shows. I'll tell you that story in a minute. But here on the wall it says, that's the mother of the stars in the center. That's the dipper of the sky. You see the twinkle ones. There's a shooting star that didn't get far away. See his tail? And so, stars, very common in quilts. These, 6-pointed star, 8-pointed star. But the way that she's brought them into the quilt and, what they represent to her is, possibly very different than what stars might represent to, say, somebody making a lone star. We know indigenous people, some of the tribes relate to and recognize lone stars, a really important part of their tradition. So this was it's a very striking quilt. And this is the grandfather quilt. I think it's grandfather's quilt slash, you can hear my cat screaming in the background. Noah's Ark. And so with this one, she has actually made this little, it represents the house, but it's almost like a little shrine. And can you guys tell what she made it out of? It's those things that you wrap lace, like lace or some kind of trimmings that you buy in the fabric store. She's gotten those and, broken them apart to make this little house shape. And just like the visual feast of these quilts is just, I took as many pictures as I could because I was like, I could be in here like with my face pressed against these quilts for hours and hours and hours. So this is Grandfather's Cabin / Noah's Ark. And this says, combining the abstract and narrative qualities of her art, Talford Scott's Grandfather's Cabin / Noah's Ark commemorates the Caldwell family's cabin on Blackstock Plantation in South Carolina. Her grandfather, born enslaved, had built the home on his sharecropper's land. Under a starry sky, the house and its surroundings became a haven for the Caldwells, Elizabeth, her siblings, and her parents, and also protects a family of vibrantly striped king snakes, shown as horizontal bands that frame the house in and under which the two clans reside quite amicably. Yes, she does. She stuffs things. Insects and animals are a really big part of her work. And rocks are really important. And we're going to see a lot more of that. So these are just some detail shots of Grandfather's Cabin. And you see like all of the different kinds of fabrics she used. I mean, she probably used very little quilting cotton. She was using these are like upholstery fabrics, sheets. You could see where she literally repurposed, already stitched linens and things. These are shapes. These I think are fish. There's frogs on another quilt that are really cool looking. But sometimes some of her pieces are so encrusted, you really have to get up close and find the outlines of them to see, exactly what you're looking at. This is like a figure here. This is like a big flower kind of shape. And she had a vision for every single one of these things. Placement of things was very important to her. None of this was haphazard. This is up in the top part. And this is a big theme in her work, are these rocks. And there's a Maryland Public TV piece, and I was going to look for it before the stream, and I just ran out of time. But I'll find it. And if it's something that is publicly available, I think sometimes with because it's PBS, Maryland Public TV is PBS. Sometimes you have to actually live in the area where you know to be able to see things. But I'll see if I can find it. But anyway, she talks about why she uses rocks, what they mean, and she literally creates these almost like little pouches that she encases the rocks in, and then they're made out of like the mesh bags that you buy like onions and oranges in. And then this one up here are like those little strawberry container, like little berry containers. I think nowadays they're just like white or clear plastic, but back, I remember when I was a kid, they were like little, almost like little wicker baskets made out of plastic. And so that's what that is. There's another quilt that is like all rocks, and there's a whole story behind that too. It's fascinating. Like, her imagination on top of these stories she was trying to tell. This work is just, even if you don't know the stories in detail, they're very, very impactful. It's just another one of the plantation. I mean, you can see, like, I walked and walked back and forth, and I was taking pictures of everything. I think I got the placards for everything but one, which is my favorite piece. I missed the placard. But I mean, see like some of this detail she's got in here. She's got like French knots and different types of embroidery. Like they're almost crazy quilt stitches that she's got around the edges. She couches. She does a lot of couching of, different types of fibers. And even like it looks like bundles of fabric. She'll kind of bundle it up into like a long piece and then couch over that. So you've got these like really dimensional pieces. I just love the stars. I couldn't stop looking at them. And you see like she's gone in and she's stitched, around these different elements and this is probably an upholstery fabric. And then the different colored threads that she's used in here. I mean, a lot of it is just design that she was putting. I mean, I think she basically said in the MPT piece, I have this vision for how these things go together. And that was like a really big piece of this. Like she planned this stuff out before she did it. But then I think there was also an element of kind of, the piece starts becoming itself and it starts telling you what it needs. I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience. But yeah, I mean, as you're working on something and it's like, oh, wait, there's something missing. And the piece tells you, like, go find another color. But these are like bullion knots. Like, there's just so much visual stimulation in these quilts. And all of these little pieces of fabric, I mean, you can imagine some of this was, stuff she probably had like a scrap bag of things. And then, as she, the years progressed, I think she was just repurposing a lot of things. So this is the detail about plantation. And also just to mention, she made it pretty fast from, going back to quilting and creating this sort of new form of quilting, what, her work looks like. She went pretty fast from like starting to do this to in major shows. And this all started in the late 70s. Like she started making things in the 70s and by like 78 or 79, she was in some major shows in like New York and I want to say 1979 was in Florida. She had a show, or she was in a show. So she was like rocking and rolling with getting her stuff out there. And I mean, the videos, like if you see any of the like filmed stuff with her, she's just like this really delightful lady. Just very funny. So this is, they're talking about the knotting. So like all of those knots that are in this one, the either bullion knots or French knots, I think are an important aspect of this. Yeah, I mean, like this one, it's got, I mean, just, I'm kind of speechless for some of it because I'm just like, what does she do there? Like, oh my goodness, that's different. That's different than one of the other stars. Okay, this is my favorite piece. This one is on loan, I think, from Rhode Island School of Design. And it is the one I forgot to take the picture of the placard. But it's called Family of Who's-Its or something like that. And I'll be honest, I don't know what it is. Like, it looks like a giant cushion. And it's just sitting on this, like, corner mounted, like, hanger. And I took pictures of it here, and then I came back to it and took pictures of it. But it also is just this really fascinating, like, thing. But it sort of drapes over. And I think it's probably meant to be like a cushion or something. Um, but here, I mean, look, she's got rocks all over the place in here. And buttons. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine. Like, where did she get all these buttons from? She must have had a source, like in garment making or something. Because the buttons that she just used, like, I mean, there must be hundreds of thousands of buttons in her work. And beads. She used a lot of costume jewelry beads and, like, almost like Mardi Gras beads. And I really love the way she does this with the rocks. Because I've been working on some pieces that are encasing little doodads and things. And so, like, I just resonate with this. I knew what her work looked like. But I had, never looked at pictures of it to get up this up close and personal. So you can see, like, it's almost like a papasan. It's like a papasan cushion. Like, that's the sort of size and shape of it. But like, some of these are figures. These are, like, sort of snaky, fishy kind of creatures. Um, so, yeah. So, like a dummy, I walked away from it instead of taking more pictures. Okay. So this one is, oh shoot, I can't remember the name of this one. Well, we'll see the placard in a minute. This one's a little bit more Spartan too. Like, we'll see her last quilt that she ever made. It is very different than this. She, again, was, like, very deliberate about how she's put these items, objects, pieces of fabric in. By the time you get to her last quilt, it's still, I'm sure, just as deliberate, but, like, the layers are so much more than this. Like, this is a quilt. Her last works were just, like, so layered and dense. I mean, they still, like, they read as quilts, but they're different than this. And, like, the rocks, like, I was so surprised. Once you get up close, you see all of the rocks. There's probably rocks in every single work. And then how she treated, these, was she fussy cutting? Was she, did she choose these pieces? I'm sure she did choose them deliberately for what appeared in them. Um, yeah. And she seemed to, at one point, she seemed to use a lot of African fabrics, like sort of African print, hourglass. This one's called hourglass. Sort of like, I don't want to say African print, like, not like wax print necessarily, but some of them probably are wax print. Other ones kind of just look like ethnographic sort of textiles. I don't know how to describe them exactly. But, like, this, I'm not exactly sure what kind of fabric this was. I think it's a garment fabric or a suiting fabric. She used a lot of wool. Um, like I said, I mean, there's not a single piece of quilting fabric in any of this. It's all garment and upholstery. And also, you will see, um, like, a lot of big names associated. So, Baltimore Applique Society and the Collectors Circle Fund, like, these are big Baltimore, well-known organizations within Baltimore. All right, so Tumbleturds. Now you know what you're calling each other. They're basically dung beetles. So she says they're beautiful bugs, but very unclean because they tumble from the cow and the animal's manure. They bundle them into balls and they lay their eggs in them. That's why they're called Tumbleturds. And what I think she's talking about, I mean, they're dung beetles, and I didn't realize that, like in the U.S., I guess in swampy regions, I guess they're like closer to bodies of water. And I mean, you always think of the like Egyptian scarab. I mean, that's essentially a dung beetle. But we have them in the U.S. too. And I think where she says they're beautiful bugs, I think it's because they're beetles and they have iridescent, like their shells are iridescent over their wings. So I think that's what she means by beautiful bugs. But I knew it had to have something to do with poop. But the fact that she's recognizing things in nature that are really beautiful. You never assumed it was delicious candy. Well, no. But yeah, so she's referencing a lot of animals and insects and things in this work, and that also surprised me. Once you get in there and you see what you're looking at, you can like see it like, oh, that's a fish, and oh, that's a frog. And I know one of the places in here there was some information about that where, often some of this imagery is thought of as, what's the word I'm looking for, as being kind of like not voodoo-y, but sort of like, the serpent and that kind of stuff, like reptiles, like that kind of stuff is often used to symbolize like evil or something bad. And so, but she took these images of, from her childhood, and no way were you thinking it was edible. Good. I'm glad you guys were not under any delusions. But anyway, so she was kind of like, claiming these images of her childhood and of, living in this rural area that, there's lots of wildlife. And candlebugs, by the way, are lightning bugs or fireflies. So that one, I mean, as a child, I grew up fairly rural, and, looking out and seeing the fireflies is just like so beautiful. And I'm kind of like imagining what, in her childhood or in her youth, seeing the fireflies, and the rural area where she lived probably had a lot less light pollution back then. So the symphony of the fireflies is something that's so amazing. And if you don't live in the US or you don't live in a part of the country or the world that has fireflies, I'm so sorry for you because they really truly are. If you can be somewhere where they actually come up out of the ground and, at night in the summer. And if you're in a place where there's, like a lot of tree cover and not a lot of light pollution, you just see it's like a light show. The way they, they're lighting up. It's so beautiful. Scarab beetle symbolizes birth and resurrection. Yes. And no, I did not know the outline of the scarab on a striped cat's head. Do you mean like the M, like on their forehead? Is that what you mean? Because I got a striped cat. And he's got a little thing on his forehead. Okay. Yeah, I always feel like the cats that have the M on their forehead, they're the ones you need to look out for because they're the ones that are like wicked smart. And when I say wicked, I mean wicked. Oh, I will. I'm going to take a picture, Druid. I'm going to make sure that I know that we're definitely talking about the same thing. Okay. Eyewinkers are eyelashes. And what she says here, eye winkers or eye blinking or whatever, in those days I didn't wear glasses. I did a lot of rough work. So finally the doctor gave me glasses. And I think this is the explanation of eye winkers and so on. But this is, I think, eye of the 80s or eyes of the 80s. This, her eye doctor, bought from her. And it hung in his office for 30 years. And we do have a picture of him. It's very tiny and probably not very good because I was taking pictures of the materials that were in there. But I just thought this was so fascinating. Like, she made this, and let me skip that real quick. Here it is. Eyes of the 80s. I had the pleasure of caring for the delightful Mrs. Scott as her ophthalmologist. She promised to give me one of her works of art if I could restore her failing eyesight. So I'm thinking maybe she gave him this. She didn't, he didn't buy it. After successful surgeries on both of her eyes, one Saturday afternoon she came to the office, and after sitting in the waiting room for some time, she asked me for a ride home. When she opened the door to her home, she presented me with this magnificent work of art. I was overwhelmed with the vibrant color and the tactile elements of the piece, but most importantly, the capacity of Mrs. Scott to capture the beauty and wonder of eyesight. She and her daughter Joyce hung the work in my examining room where it has been enjoyed by so many patients over the past 33 years. So I'm guessing he's still in practice. Like, this was written for this show. And his name is, I don't know if it's Basil or Basil Morgan. So if you're in the Baltimore area and need to have your eyes checked, I hear it on good authority that Dr. Morgan is a good eye doctor. Okay, so let's go back a sec. So this is the thing that they're explaining what the name is. So among Elizabeth Talford Scott's reoccurring symbols are insects, birds, and snakes, and fish, embroidered and pieced into many of her fantastical collage-like quilts. Whether abstract or representational in her work, each creature has a special name, purpose, and memory associated from the artist's childhood. Eyewinkers are eyelashes, candlebugs are fireflies or lightning bugs, and tumbleturds are the dung beetles of the Carolina swamps. The accompanying 3 artworks and archival footage embody Talford Scott's imaginative universe in her own words. So in this room, where this was hung, and then the grandfather's cabin and plantation were like on opposing walls. It was these 3 works that she talked about in some of these clips, and so they were projecting this. It was archival footage that from a bunch of different sources, but they were projecting it on the wall, and so that's what that reference was to these 3 works. So actually, I'm sure I got a picture of it, but let's just zoom in. I mean, look at this. You can see the eye, again, something I have a lot in my work is the eye, including on my body. And here you can see what I was talking about when she makes like bundles of fabric and then couches it down with embroidery stitches. And so it's like this, kind of explosion of color out of the eye shape. And I mean, just again, so much to look at. And you can kind of see like how her work is sort of evolving in some ways, like the way that she's kind of doing these inner, sort of inner outlines to make these pieces like really pop. And I don't know if she like stuffed some of them after the fact, or if this is just the thick stuffing that she's using inside is just making things pop. I think it might have been a little bit of both. Where she's adding stuff in, and then sometimes she's giving it some dimension. Yeah, this was the close-up of the eye. Yeah, and here you could kind of see, like, I don't, this is not African wax print, but I think these are some type of African print fabrics here. But then you could see these other ones look like, kind of funky, like clothing prints, maybe from the 50s and 60s. Or 60s and 70s. You've got these like silky fabrics, that could have been like a dress or a top or pants even. So yeah, just so much in here. And then pieces of corduroy. And I mean, I love the way she's like kind of scrunched it up and then done the stitching over it. It's so tactile. And then just like random buttons. And I say random in means of like, as you're, looking through the quilt that you'll suddenly find one. I don't mean random like she didn't have a plan. But then like right here in the middle, look at this. It's a rock and it has like, it's got wrapping around it. And then it's got some beads and then like this little, I think this was like more of a sequin or a disc kind of thing. But it's that like making this little bundle of, meaningful things, and then using it there. But when you back up, you don't necessarily see it until you like get up there really close. I mean, I'm not lying when I say, you could literally sit in front of one of these quilts for an hour And, you know, and there's a really cool quote from her daughter about that. I mean, I get, I'm just like, ah, like just stunned. Um, so this is sort of just an overview. I'm not going to really read this in detail, but it does talk about the fact how she uses found objects, um, and seashells, and you know, she's finding, you know, fabrics. And you know, it's funny. I can't remember if I told you guys. I studied her daughter's work. When I started college. Well, when I was still in high school, I was looking at going to art school in sculpture, and I was really into beading and making jewelry, like beaded jewelry and things. And so I ran across Joyce Scott's work. So I knew about Joyce Scott like long before I moved to Baltimore, and it wasn't until I moved to Baltimore that I found out Joyce Scott's mother was this amazing quilter. So it's really funny. I think maybe some people maybe learn about them the other way around, like learn about Elizabeth Scott and then find out about Joyce. Now this one is like ties. These are all ties, like neckties. Um, and then these almost remind me. I mean, I think what she did was she cut these pieces out and then, you know, stitched them the way she did. But they almost remind me of like a reverse applique. You know, as you look at these pieces, how she added them in. But I believe these are all her father's neckties, maybe. I'll have to read the placard. But yeah, here's more of that like bundles of fabric, and in these ways, it's almost like when she's couching them, it's almost like she's twisting them or she's making them like a little poofy as she, you know, they're not couched down so tight that they're smooth. It's like they've got these little bubbles of fabric that pop up. Okay, so this is the birthday quilt. Um, okay, so made of neckties. Some of them were her grandfather's. Okay, I thought it was her father. Her godfather's in there, and a dog and a cat, a dog or a cat, a grandmother that you can't see her. Talford Scott speaks through the border of deep green and black that hovers protectively around the intense red of the central rectangle, like a mother protecting her child. But sensing the emotional level of a Talford Scott quilt is less a matter of explanation and interpretation than of the communication of pure feeling. Birthday quilt doesn't have to be interpreted to have the love revealed. Talford Scott puts the love in there, and to see the quilt is to know it's there. That above all is her gift to the world. And this is that was a statement by John Dorsey, who is an art critic. And the Fabric of Memory is a Baltimore Sun article. So I made sure to take pictures of all of those so I can actually find the better copy to read. Because they had this really cool like scrapbook thing, but it's impossible to photograph that stuff, and I wasn't going to start taking stuff out of the shiny plastic. I have a little bit of leeway at this museum because I know some people, but I'm not going to try to start acting badly. So yeah, so like what that little piece said, you know, you've got these you know, all of these ties are kind of like this protective outer layer, and then you've got this like, I don't know, I think of it as like the squishy center, you know, that's the, you know, arms around you grandmother part of it. And some of these fabrics I thought were so, like this one is some type of like boating fabric, like it has these little ships or, you know, and I totally see, I mean, I know I have some train fabric that's very similar to this. I think that was just 60s and 70s, that like upholstery, maybe even earlier than that, but that upholstery fabric that was, I don't know what they were trying to do with it. I guess it was supposed to be reflecting, you know, history or chintz, or I don't know. This is definitely African wax print fabric right here. And this is, I want to say this type is a little different than, it's a different region of West Africa than what the Dutch print, the Dutch wax prints. There's certain ones, the Dutch wax prints tend to have less crackle in them. Whereas there's another form of printing that, or of printing and dyeing that has more of the crackle that's similar to like batiks. And it's kind of all the same process. Amy Beisner does a whole lot of similar works with found objects. She uses things she finds on the shores of Alaska near her home. Some is trash from cruise ships. Oh, yeah. Also sourced unwanted quilts, blocks, crochet, embroidery, and items from people that no longer want them. Many things they got from family that has passed. Yeah. You know, all of these makers that do these kind of like memory and found object pieces, you know, they're usually like this visual feast. But yeah, then you can work in these stories about those found objects, and what they mean, you know, to you as an artist, or what they mean like in the bigger picture of things. I know I've seen Amy Meissner stuff, but I'm drawing a complete blank on what it looks like. I guess depending on how I'm doing with time, I can look her up and share her info. I mean, just like this. Like, I don't know what this stuff. Oh, thank you, Robin. I don't know. This looks like some kind of Christmas tinsely, like, I don't know, package wrapping, or maybe it's like a gold braid from some, you know, a trim. I don't know. There's just like, again, such a feast of things, and it's like you're looking at the imagery, you're looking at the different fabrics, you're looking. Oh my gosh, Robin, I didn't know that. Oh, that's awesome. Small world. But yeah, and then you're looking and you're like, how did she construct this? Like, how did she make that? Like, when did she put this piece down? Like, there's just so much to think about and look with these types of quilts. Now this was, okay. These were like small objects. This is a rock quilt, and I kid you not, she talks about using this as a weight on her body. Like, you know, like, I just, and knowing what the weight of that probably is. And then she did in the Maryland Public Television piece, they showed her in the classroom with the students that were originally like 25 years ago studying her work. And she like puts it on the table. And I mean, you can see like and feel like the heaviness of this little piece. And it's only like about yay big. It's not big at all. And it's called Rocks of Prison, or Rocks in Prison. This one is like a very amorphous sort of thing. And then I don't know if I got a really good picture of this little doodad. And I don't remember what it is. Yes, no kidding, Robin. Her work has got to be very heavy because, not only are there rocks involved, but there are also, just all of so much stuff. And in fact, even before she passed away, there were students that were helping conserve the work, like, because the weight of these things just being transported to different shows is damaging to them. And there were some students that were in this video that talked about how they were just trying to fix things like popped stitches and stuff, and how she was watching and was like, well, put that there and do that there. And they were like, we're not like saving your quilt. We're not conserving your quilt. We're actually now working with you to change the quilt. And they were like, are we supposed to do that? And, but she was directing them, so it's like, well, I mean, what are you going to say when the artist is like, you know what? You don't just have to fix that. Like, do this and it'll make it better. I mean, can you imagine? There's not a whole lot of artists today that you could just like do that. So, yeah, I mean, this is like such a tiny little artifact. And I did not actually read I did not read the placards for this little case. So we are going to read that together. But when I go back, so a painkiller, put this on your stomach or wherever it hurts, hold that on and you're all right. She's talking about this rock quilt. She's literally saying like laying it on, a spot in your body. Have you ever seen those things like you put in the microwave and they get hot and cold, or you can put them in the freezer and they get cold? Like they've got, like sometimes they've got buckwheat hulls in them. Sometimes it's rice. Like that's what I think of. Like that is how she's talking about using this little quilt as like literally a thing that can help you physically. Okay. So the first one, that's this. She says, okay, so this is written by Olitha Devane, reflects on Untitled in her collection. So this belongs to somebody who lives in Ellicott City, very close to where I am. Mother Scott carried ancient wisdom. I remember the long string beans she grew in her Baltimore City backyard garden. They made me think of her fingers, long and agile when she threaded the needle. She made my shield of iridescent pink and gold fabric with 3 rocks from the earth, the center one wrapped in red and copper fabric, 2 smaller ones wrapped in yarn, a metaphor of prayer for mother and children. To plant a seed, you must get your hands dirty. To watch it grow requires water, patience, and love before it flowers. Children are that way. Ugh. Oh gosh, yes, Jill. You know what? And I actually have helped too with I have done the takedown crew for QuiltCon. It's been pre-pandemic is when I was doing them. And yes, it is so stressful when you're like, helping with quilts, and particularly ones that have like objects on them, found objects, or they're encrusted or have things stitched on them in some way. I helped with a section of the AIDS quilt that they had in Pasadena at the QuiltCon in Pasadena. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this thing weighs 1,000,000 pounds, and you're not supposed to let anything touch the floor, and you got to be very careful, you got to hold things up. And I was just like, I'm holding a piece of history in my hands, and it's freaking me out. Like, what if I drop this thing? What if something comes off? And then another set of work that I handled was Sherilyn Miller's stuff, and she has some that are literally like it's like a quilted piece, and then in the center it has like pins and needles sticking out of it, and they are in no way like secure. They're literally just sticking out of the quilt. And so what we had to do was, she had instructions for how you had to like sandwich the packing materials on the back and the front of this section of the quilt, and then you had to like roll it and fold it a certain way. Oh my god, it's so stressful. So I can't imagine with Elizabeth Scott's stuff, because it is so encrusted and it's so heavy. I could definitely see people stressing out. And not only is this show like, there's a lot of these pieces that are in private collection. Hey Eva, waffle batter, no complaints there. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is in people's private collection. So it's it's one thing like if you're like, you got to contend with the artist, or you got to contend with like another museum. But when you're talking about like private citizens, you've lent their stuff. I can only imagine, Jill. I would be like, can you insure my hands? Because they're probably going to fumble. Okay, so this little rock thing is mixed media, and it says, the rock fits in your hand perfectly and has a satisfying weight, expressing some of our feelings associated with being married. We fit together and cherish the significance of our life together. We treasure this beautifully embellished artifact. Oh, I love that, artifact. Wrapped in knitting and beads. Liz allowed her art to carry her in many directions, and we can only imagine that each string of beads was wishing us a good life together. Mom Scott's stone was a wedding gift to us in 1983. Revisiting it now in 2023, it is a gift packed with memories. Liz's random trails of beads and thread over, under, and around the stone have more meaning now that we have been together many years through many journeys. And so the owners of this are Linda De Palma and Paul Daniel. Oh my gosh. This is their wedding gift. Oh my gosh. And then Rocks in Prison. Talford Scott's prayer shawl, Rocks in Prison, manages security's double edge. It waited at the ready to rest on a sore shoulder or back to ease arthritic pain. It was her way of healing, and she said she arranged the lines of rock as if they were text. The rocks on her blanket are at once trapped and secured, rocks in prison, and rocks as agents of prayer and healing. It suggests that blankets heal and help us feel secure, but they can also tell stories of terror and absence and sanctified violence. So, hey, Kenny. Well, if you have to blow off a meeting, I'm just kidding. I know you've got important stuff going on, but I'm glad that you could stop by while you're making hexies. Yay! Shout out to Kenny. Yes, if you don't follow Kenny, please follow Kenny and watch his streams too. He does actual quilting while I just talk about it. You absolutely right, Robin. A weighted blanket, like it's there for, this comforting and, I mean, you just think about anything like holding a child, the weight of a child, or, the weight of something soothing. It's got so many layers of meaning. So I want to go back and look at this again. So again, like I said, I mean, this thing is not that big. It is definitely something that, like, if this were a consumer product filled with rice that you'd put in the microwave or whatever, it's like the size of that. But I mean, how amazing that, like, all of the layers of meaning that she put into this object. And then this little thing. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look at this in more detail because I did not give it its due, I think. And then like this was very intriguing because it's this like copper lame and this pink iridescent lame. So I mean, it just goes back to like the kind of fabrics she was just, this pink and coppery gold made sense for the person she was making it for. Let's see, what is this one called? This one's called Temple. And this is one of her later works. This one, I mean, so absolutely encrusted with, all these beads and buttons and, I mean, some of them are obviously clearly they're plastic buttons, but some of them are not. Some of them are, seem to be buttons that have probably been rescued from clothing. I suspect, I have no idea, but I suspect she might have known somebody like a garment worker or somebody who might have had access to getting, buttons in bulk, that kind of thing. Yes, Kellen, memory jugs. Yeah, that's a definitely an interesting like comparison. Yeah, Robert, I actually am curious too, like exactly how heavy that thing is. I'll see if I can find that MPS thing. I will definitely pull the clip so you can see her show it to these students. But yeah, I wanted to look in here, like you could see, like this is like a braid of some kind, like an upholstery braid. Some of this looks like kind of that bundled technique that she made. I mean, you have rocks in here. You had to look closely sometimes, but they're there. And I just had no idea about the extent of the rocks that she put in these quilts. But I mean, just letting your eye follow this around. And to me, this just seems like a shrine, or this shape in the center just has a very it's either a bundle or a body. It's got that kind of like body sort of, presentation. It could be symbolic of that. That's the close-up of it. And I'm a sucker for bright pink. So you can see these little splashes of pink. Like I'm like it's like a magnet for my eyes. I see those things and I'm like, oh, beauty. There's the rocks. And I'm guessing like she used the netting obviously to attach it. Like that's how she would get it attached. I don't remember what this is. This looks like kind of some crumpled up metallic like lame or something. Around the edges, this is kente cloth. It's definitely kente cloth. Okay, I loved this. So this was made, let me zoom in so you can see. So this was a double-sided quilt sample featuring bound rocks and various textured materials from netting to silk and corduroy, inspired by Elizabeth Talford Scott's artworks in this gallery. Mica Quilt Group liaison and EDS collaborator Sarah Z. Barnes created this work for you to explore. Please touch this sample, not the artworks. So they have it in Braille, and you were allowed to touch this piece. And, just this lifting up this little piece that this contemporary artist created. So this is a rock. This is a seashell that's wrapped in beads. She's got all these different trims. This alone had some heft to it. Even though it was very small, it's only, yay big. And I got up close on some stuff here. And then I made my son flip it over. And the back of it is also, she's quilted it with she's pieced all these little tiny pieces. This looks like a lot of upholstery fabric. The top part seems to be more of like garment fabrics. So very cool and very much, in line with her work, very, very, very much like her work. Okay. This quote, everything in there is wild as I am. This is my grandmother's pattern. They used to get real wildflowers if somebody passed and made a quilt. You'd see flowers on top of the coffin, and they're called blankets of flowers. And this is the quilt she's talking about. This is the piece. This is my favorite piece, besides that round-shaped one that was kind of cushion-like. They have a bench in front of this one, so you could just sit and look at it. But, I just wanted to climb, and it sits up on kind of a little platform. I think because it doesn't lay flat, but this is, let me show you one of the better ones. This is like a bazillion yo-yos. And she's just made, and some of them I think are, the crumpled fabric like that she's making into the pieces, these long snaky pieces. And then all of these, it must have taken her forever to make this piece. But it is like literally breathtaking, and it is kind of the showpiece. Like when you walk in, you see all of the other pieces on the walls, but you see this and you're like, I gotta look at that. Like, I don't know what this is. I gotta look at it. And there is this is like a visual feast in here. This is the piece where in the Maryland Public TV piece, the clip about her, where one of the students that was interviewed was saying, I was helping fix this because, obviously it's the weight and the, these little things, they pop off or they become loose, just with, moving. And she said, we're just trying to conserve it. And she's like, oh, hey, put that over there. So, again, she's got this vision. Obviously, she could look at this piece and say, oh, if we're going to change something, I want it to be here in this way. Some of my work is pretty busy. And I don't know that I have the capacity to sit and look at it after the fact. Well, while somebody else fixes it. I think that part of it, I'd be like, no, I'll do it. But, just to sit there and watch somebody else conserving it and saying, hey, why don't you change this? Do this to it. That was just wild. And then there's this little piece up in the corner, and this is a person on a swing, I think. And this piece is small, it's like, a little portrait. And so person on a swing, rarely does an imaginary work of art provide as much visual and intellectual pleasure as person on a swing. At the center of this work is an idealistic message about the wonders of nature conjoined with the joys of humanity. Pictured from the top of the quilt to the bottom are the lengthy strings of a swing that evokes fingers making a V shape, a recognizable symbol of peace. The bright yellow sky indicates the absence of darkness and any dark threat of danger, and 3 beautiful butterflies fly perfectly together as if escorting the person on the swing. And then Flower Garden number 1 is created from thousands of knotted lengths of yarn and thread sewn together to create a compressed composition. The floral references come from Talford Scott's love of growing flowers and vegetables from her youth. This particular style was originally conceived for rug designs used in her home. The technique recalls her youth when scraps of twine, yarn, and thread were recycled to make rugs for the family home in South Carolina. What this scholar missed was the fact that not only are these threads and fibers, but these are yo-yos. And from the perspective of quilt making and the significance of this in the technical construction that we look at, these are yo-yos. And seeing how she took this concept of the yo-yo and made it into something completely like, this looks nothing like the cute little yo-yo tabletop things or the cute little yo-yo summer throws that you sew. This is like, she took this to a whole different level. So yeah, I could sit here for a very long time and talk about just this piece. And this one probably has the broadest range of button types, and I'm an absolute sucker for buttons too. So, that one's a pretty old button right there. I mean, just, like the different segments of the quilt. I mean, I just, like, look at that. Look at that. I feel like my pictures don't even do this justice. Oh, and then, as they said in this one, these are the 3 butterflies that the little blurb was talking about here at the top. And then this is the person on the swing. I know, Robin, right? It is just amazing. And I think about the fact that she was an elderly woman when, she was past retirement age. She, she's working on this stuff. I think at the point she started quilting, making these pieces, I think her husband was deceased. And so she doesn't have anybody there helping her. Like, I'm sure Joyce, her daughter helped her, if she needed assistance, but like, this stuff's heavy. Like, I can't even imagine. Like, I know if I was working on something this big and this intricate and, with so much going on in it, I would need some help, like lifting them and moving them. So I don't know if her workspace just happened to be like, she didn't have to pick this stuff up very often, or, if there was somebody that helped her, as she worked on these pieces, but, so, and again, some of them are small, but like the really big ones, it's just blows my mind. I mean, here you see like these sequin trims. Here's like, those trade beats that were really popular in the 80s and 90s. This one, I'm drawing a blank on the name of this one. I know I have the placard in a minute, but this one appears to me that she's used vintage or antique textile pieces that already had some stitching in them. I don't think that this is her stitching on these. And then she made this little apron type of shape, but it is not an apron. However, it's embroidery that is pulled from some other type of textile. And to me, these looked like, it's a little fawn and 2 squirrels. They remind me of crazy quilting, what this stuff looks like. So I don't know if she, utilized pieces from another quilt, or if these were just textiles she had, or she got, had access to. So yeah, this one, like, again, you can tell, compare all these quilts, you're like, you could tell the same artist made them. But, this one's just a very different kind of, look. This one is, a little bit more like some of the other, definitely this is not like the garden one. Yes, right? Kellen, it is, I just like to an artist like this, making something that these are story quilts. There is a story, whether you can tell what it is or not. She had an intention of a story here, and I just would love to like peek in and see like what is her thought process as she was making these quilts, as she was designing them, as she was, stitching. These look like, to me, this plaid and then this red, these look like more like contemporary fabrics. I wouldn't say they're necessarily like quilting cottons, but they're a little bit closer to what some contemporary quilters that use mixed media might use. Lowry's quilt. So this one's called Lowry's. We all accumulate bits of things and knickknacks in the course of our lives. Although inconsequential in the scheme of things, they assume occult or talismanic meanings. A souvenir hat from a visit to Africa, a childhood embroidered apron sent by a pen pal in France. So that, I guess that was originally an apron. Beads and buttons from long lost favorite jewelry or garments. What a fantastic opportunity, then, to have sent them off to Elizabeth Talford Scott to do her own magic, assembling these remnants and remembrances. But attention, she inevitably added her own surprises, bits of knotted cloth, glittery sections, and rocks anchored onto the surface with recycled supermarket netting. The added weight provides an added sense of security as you sleep blissful within the volumes of this quilt. And so, this quilt, it appears, was made for her. Lowry Stokes Sims. So she lives in Baltimore. I don't, or he. I don't know. Lowry might be a man. But yeah, so this is, again, like there's all of these local people that do have her work, or pieces of her work. And that's also amazing that some of this stuff has stayed in Baltimore. And I mean, I just like, I could not stop. I mean, this looks like, oh gosh, ICOT, or ECOT, and then this right here, that little piece looks like some 1970s fabric. There's more rocks. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I guess the apron is the thing that is apron-like. So I guess this is a child's apron, but, and I'm guessing maybe it's just the way she embroidered on top of it, which makes it look, like she pieced it together. I just kept taking pictures every time I walked past something. This, I don't think I read this earlier. It's a prayer. This is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth, rocks all around, and then came man. Which she talks about the rocks, is very clear that some of this stuff is influenced by her faith. She doesn't talk about necessarily about being religious. But when she talks about the rocks, she does say this, rocks came first. They were here before us. And, if you look at the Rock of Gibraltar, which, is an important, Christian, iconic thing. So she talked about those things, and it's like, you can definitely then see, oh, okay, this is where, childhood memories kind of meet, religious, opinions. This is called Joyce's quilt. And this one, my son, wanted to cry. And I'll read you, Joyce has words about this and this other piece. This reminded me of the Fante, the flags that they, I think it's at the Fante. I have a book about them, but it's in Ghana. It's the indigenous people of Ghana made these flags to essentially psych out the other tribes. And this reminds me of that, these big blocks of fabric that have these very specific pieces on them. That's what these remind me of. So you'll see what this piece that she's talking about in a minute. But this is Lois Scott Cash, who I think, I'm trying to remember. Yes, the Asafo flags. Thank you, Kellen. The Asafo Fante, yes, they are. I guess it's a tribe. I mean, I guess that the group of people would be called a tribe. A tribe. So yeah. So this person is Lois Scott Cash. So she's a relative. I can't remember. I know I've seen a list of names of people and how they're related, and I can't remember if this is a sister or no. This Scott, because this would be her husband's last name. In any event, Mama Lizzie made 1 or 2 quilts at a time. That lady would sit up all night if she wanted to finish it. When I asked her how she did it, all she said was, I just do it. She told me this is your piece and wanted me to work on it, but I wasn't interested. I thought it was fascinating, but I just wanted to watch. After having this work all these years, I was recently lying in bed and looking up at the wall, and I kept seeing all these little sparkles in it. I didn't realize all this time I had it that it lights up in different spots at night. That's how gifted she was. And so this is the piece she's talking about. Now, this, to me, takes what she did in the garden quilt and distills it down to this. So the garden quilt to me has it has a quilt aspect of it because it's got the yo-yos, and those are all put together in a way that helps it read quilt. This to me is simply artwork. I don't, I mean, this is still a quilt, an art quilt, but to me, this is just a textile artwork, because it doesn't read quilt. And this is where, I mean, this is all the knotted pieces of fabric. You know, this is where she went to town with that. And there are no pieces. Yes, rug vibes, absolutely. This doesn't have any of those, you know, those little clustered bits of yo-yos. Does not have any objects in it that I could tell. I think it is literally all fabric and thread. But you can see what she's talking about, what like the sparkles. She's got all these little lame pieces in here. And it looks like I think some of the threads were kind of shiny. Maybe some type of mylar thread. And this piece was probably, I would say, about the size of an ironing board. Like, because it was long and, you know, narrow. Okay, so let's go back and look at Joyce's quilt. So Joyce's quilt, this one is mine, made for me. Each stitch a kiss. Colors whisper lullabies. You can't hear them because this quilt is mine. So she's saying like, you can't hear what's in this quilt because it was for me. And my son like lost it when he read that. I was like, come on, kid, keep it together. So yeah, you can see like, you know, get all this kind of imagery. And I mean, again, this is a quilt that has got, it's encrusted with stuff. You're meant to sleep under the weight of this. And one of the pieces that she talks about, and I think it was the PBS piece, it's this cushion she shows, and she goes, yeah, this was Joyce's baby. This is Joyce's baby pillow. And she was like, she was kind of a chubby little thing, but we put her on this and she wouldn't roll off or anything. One side of the quilt, or one side of the pillow, is very like poofy and pillow like. She flips it over and it's like got all kinds of stuff stitched on it. And I was like, I'm assuming she stitched on it later, like, you know, because of the dates. Like, you think about the dates of when she was working on these items versus making like traditional sewn objects. So I don't know about that baby pillow. I'm gonna have to find that clip and watch it again to see exactly what she meant. But yeah, it was so funny. She was just like a mom saying stuff about her kid. Okay, this one. Okay, I did say that those other two were my favorites. This one's also my favorite. This is about what is the name of it? Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And this is a fish here. You have snakes and tadpoles. And then you have these frogs. Look at these frogs, you guys. I was just looking at a dealer's website, and they had some of these doorstops they're filled with like beans. And I remember my grandmother had one. And I think that's kind of like the shape that, and I'm not saying that Elizabeth was inspired by or was looking at those door stops, but that sort of basic froggy shape, it was a simple, very graphic looking design. And it's like she took this and did, I mean, look how its little feet are flipped under, um, and, just made these into these amazing elements on this quilt. And then is this one? Yeah, this one, this is like a spidery kind or a bug up here. You can see it's got like a bunch of legs. This is like a starfish, I think. Um, some of these, I think they're just representative of different kinds of fish. And there's the bundle of rocks. And there's another bundle of rocks up here, I think. No, I guess it's just this one. But I mean, yeah, they're strange. They are. They're wonderfully strange. And when you see work like this, you're like, okay, there was something so fascinating in the imagination of this maker. This, like, I know this is supposed to be something under the sea. It's probably like a shell, but it's like heart shaped. It's got that sort of roundness about it. So this one says she remembers when she was young, you could be accused of witchcraft if you use certain animals in your work. So she's talking about, like frogs and snakes and things. She consciously broke from the public past and began using them. Voyage is replete with aquatic creatures, which in the African Atlantic world can also represent the messengers between the world of the living and the dead, sometimes described as the world under the water. Talford Scott has even stated that her works contain live animals, including insects and rocks that can fight back. According to her, the insects can sting and the rocks can butt. And this was from a Smithsonian show. This is like one of those Indian print, tapestry kind of textiles, I think. Oh, and there are the frogs have rocks on them too. And you see this yarn. This is some type of like holiday yarn that has like the tinsel woven through it. I mean, I just feel like she had all of these wonderful, um, fibers and things. I don't, that she sought out or people gave her. Um, like there's so much metallic-y stuff in this one. Um, this looks like a sweater. It was from a sweater. Yeah, there's this frog, and then yeah, this insect again. Um, it's got these beads, and then this kind of silvery thing. The snake. Okay, and this is her quote. That's the electric fish. Whatever he touches, he burns it. He doesn't have anything around him but a shell and a leaf. It could be one of his eggs. He owns his own pond. And so that's this right here. That's what she's talking about, this creature here. And then these two things down here. This is the pond she's talking about, and then all of the stuff around it. So I think this might be, no, this isn't a repeat. So when her daughter Joyce, now an internationally acclaimed artist, she was an internationally acclaimed artist in the 90s. When Joyce left home for college and graduate school in the late 60s, Elizabeth Telford Scott returned to quilting as a refuge from loneliness. Intervening years had transformed her artistic vision. She assembled vibrantly colored and reflective fabrics from around the world into symmetrical shapes and patterns that stray from traditional concepts of quilt making. Her new quilts stretched the boundaries of the traditional form and merged needlework and piecing techniques with abstract designs, found objects such as rocks and seashells, and fabric gathered from the events and people in her life. Upon her retirement in 1970, Talford Scott was able to devote herself full-time to quilt making. From that point forward, her quilts took on new sculptural shapes, materials, and forms, incorporating stones, shells, pine cones, beads, buttons, bones, men's ties, and other scraps and objects that held special meaning to her family and friends. These quilts, in effect, became historical records of her memories and her family heritage. The resulting textiles are more than quilts. They are prayer pillows, healing shawls, family diaries, artistic creations that incorporate Talford Scott's personal symbolism with imagery of the African diaspora and the American Deep South. So that's some weighty weighty words there. Okay, this I won't go through in detail, but this is a timeline, you know, of her quilt making and of her life. And so you could see, like, and here is when she went to Baltimore in the 1940s. And then, you know, the trajectory of the rest of her life in, you know, in quilting. And then this piece, we'll look at this piece in a minute. But you can see this picture. If you look her up, that's the picture you're most often going to see. And it is by Carl Clark, this picture. And I just think this is such a great picture. You know, it's like, I don't know if it was candid or if he's told her to pose this way. I don't know, you know. Yeah. So this piece, this is one of Joyce Scott's pieces. And it's actually only half of the work. And I don't know why they only have the one part of it. It's actually a pair of hands. And it is meant to, it's meant to be her mother's hands. But you see now it's called Mother's Hand. And so this is at the Goya Contemporary Gallery. They own it. And they actually own part of the stuff in this collection. The stuff that's not in people's personal collections, for the most part, belongs to the Goya and not the BMA. So just about everything in this show is borrowed from, you know, either private owners or the Goya. But yeah, this should be two hands, and I have a picture of it that I can show you later. Okay, so I mean, these are all the, you know, all of the different shows and articles and things about her. So Joyce wrote a piece called Ode to Mama Lizzie, and I cannot find the actual recording. I mean, you can listen to the recording there in the museum. I can't find the actual recording, but I can give you a link to the transcript. So, oops. This one here. I'll put it in the chat. So, it's performed by a group of people who, some of them are still involved, like, in this show, but they performed it live at her memorial service at her homecoming, or her homegoing. So yeah, it was pretty impactful. Now this, a lot of museums do this. They'll have something that the viewers can, I haven't said yet why. I'll get there. I'll talk about my two disappointments at the same time. So, you know, a lot of museums will have kind of a study area. And I thought this was great. They had a bunch of different books. You know, a number of them are children's books. And, you know, the intent is, you know, for lots of people to be, you know, interested in this, not just adults, but also children. They have Thomas Knauer's book, Bisa Butler's book. So yeah, they had like lots of really great things here on the table for people to look at. They had a couple of exhibition catalogs. They have one that is an exhibition catalog that usually sells for like $100 and some. My son found it for me, and I snapped it up right away, and it was not $100. They had literally like her original slides. This is a copy of the original catalog, the exhibition catalog 25 years ago. And I took a couple pictures, but the problem is the overhead lights do not make it easy. But I did get a picture of the statement by George Siskel, and I'm not going to read that today. These are the hands. This is Joyce's, the hands. So, move this over a little bit. So you could see they're flat. The way her beading is, it's usually flat pieces that she'll kind of make them sculptural. I think they're much more impactful as a pair of hands, but there must be some reason why the Goya only gave them one. I feel like when it's a pair of hands, you see, like, you get the intent, mother's hands. When it's just one hand, it kind of looks like a crypt keeper. It's like something somebody stole. The hands are made they're beaded. It's entirely made of, oh, I can't remember the beading technique. It's an off loom technique, but it's basically like she's using wire and she threads the beads through, and it's making like a tapestry out of the beads and wire. But then because she's doing it off loom, she can make it into these sculptural pieces. She has a lot of pieces that are like, they're almost like dioramas, kind of. They're dimensional with people, and really interesting stuff. But I thought this was really nice to include in the exhibition, because this is about Elizabeth by Joyce. This is an example of a rug that she had made. And then now this is the scrapbook that they had, and a lot of the stuff that's on the wall is also reflected in the scrapbook. So you can see 1979. She's getting some big recognition here. This is Florida A&M. This was the first National African American Crafts Conference in Jubilee. Ritual and Myth. There's a bunch of stuff from New York and the Smithsonian that talked about her work. Yeah, I mean, just lots of people were talking. She was fascinating a lot of people. This is a piece that she calls this one the hourglass quilt. This is different, that there's another hourglass quilt, and this one's different. This is the Baltimore, the Sun article that I'm going to find so I can have a better version of it. So this is the Smithsonian piece about her. And I think this is the piece I really love. And I don't think do they have the title of it? You know what? This is called Save the Babies. They mistitled that one and the other one. That is an hourglass quilt. But yeah, this one they don't have the reference for it. I hate that. Yeah, so this is the original. This is her eye doctor who owns that piece with the eye. Dr. I don't know if it's Basil or Basel. We're going to say Basel. Basel sounds fancy. Okay. So here's the first thing that disappointed me. They had the book hidden in plain view out on the table with the other wonderful quilting books. And the reason that they had it out is because they talk about her in the book. However, if you're new here, let me tell you, this book is a steaming pile of garbage. So let me find a better way of qualifying that. So Jacqueline Tobin is a woman who went in search of more deep and interesting information on African American quilting. Jacqueline Tobin's a white woman. And I don't feel that, I'm not the kind of person who draws racial lines and says, oh, you can't write about, this person of color because you're not a person of color. I don't believe in that. But there are some stories that are meant to be told by the people that they impacted. And this is one of them. Now, this whole idea of quilts and the Underground Railroad, there is literally not a shred of evidence anywhere that is true. And a lot of people found out about this book, never read it, but say, oh, So they've proven that there were these quilt code on the Underground Railroad. Now, the story that this woman told Jacqueline Tobin, she was an elderly quilter. I think she was in South Carolina too. Um, if it was in South Carolina, it was like maybe Georgia. It was somewhere right around there. Um, Now I don't think this woman like made up a story out of whole cloth, but I think the way she told the story, either she misrepresented what she was explaining to Jacqueline Tobin, and or Jacqueline Tobin made up some shit. Because I mean, again, there is absolutely no evidence that this whole idea of like, oh, if you see a log cabin quilt hanging on the line, it means this. And if you see, this kind of bow tie quilt, it means dress up in your best. Well, the thing is, they didn't necessarily have some of these patterns that Jacqueline Tobin talks about. They did not have these kind of patterns during the Civil War. So, debunking number one. But I truly think she completely misconstrued the storytelling aspect of African American story quilts, and she turned it into something that it's not. There is absolutely a very deep tradition of African American story quilts, and there is coded information in them. I mean, we just looked at all of this work by Elizabeth Talford Scott, and without the context, you don't know what the story is. You know there's a story there, but you don't know what the story is until you read the context. And I think that is what this woman who told Jacqueline Tobin these stories was trying to communicate. But Jacqueline Tobin, I've read the piece where Jacqueline Tobin meets the woman, and I apologize, I don't remember her name, but where she meets the woman, this elderly quilter, and she basically like pesters the crap out of this woman to share your secrets with me, and it took her like I think a number of years before this woman be like, all right, sit down and we'll talk. And so she kind of, the way she describes this whole like interaction with this elderly African American quilt maker is just kind of gross. I mean, I don't like to judge people, and I don't like to judge their writing, and I don't like to judge their experiences because their experiences are their own. But the way she writes about her experience with this quilter is just gross. It's just, it's arrogant, and it's like, it comes across as like, I'm a chosen person. Eva, you'd have to read it to kind of understand what I'm saying. She's an academic, and she basically went in and she said, I wanted this information, and she wouldn't give it to me. She kept telling me I wasn't ready. And she kind of has spun this whole story about like, I was finally chosen to get the information. And I'm like, no, okay, excuse my language. No, bitch, you were not. Like, you wore this woman down, and she told you what you wanted to hear, and then you turned it into something that was totally like off the wall. The other piece of that kind of falls in line with this, Eli Leon was another person who he was a collector, collected a lot of African American quilts, but he had some theories that were not like, he had this idea, and I think this woman Jacqueline Tobin, I don't think she actually says this, but she kind of toes the line about this, where folks that, folks who are from the African diaspora, particularly folks who came here and are descendants of enslaved people, have in their DNA this very specific look and feel to their imagery that came from Africa. And we're not talking about like people who studied the work, the work and the folk art of Western Africa. We're talking about like, I am descended from enslaved people, therefore it is in my DNA, and I just know how to make these images. It's one thing for stories and imagery and, talismanic things to be handed down generations. And I absolutely believe that they're in some enslaved families that have that lineage of the African diaspora and have had enslaved ancestors. I absolutely believe that through their oral storytelling and their family, that there's information that is probably like, great grandparents. They came here from, the Ivory Coast or the Nigeria, or, the different countries at that point in time that were there on Western Africa. And it would not in any way surprise me to, for these kind of things to come down through the family as an oral tradition. But for this woman to be like, oh, it's in their DNA, and Eli and Leon too, it's in their DNA. Like they just know, they know the symbology. They know, like, it's gross. I'm like, first of all, let these artists speak for themselves. Don't do this speaking for them. And also, don't make junk up. So that's how I feel about this book. That's what other people feel about this book. It's a very controversial book, and it really made me very uncomfortable that they had it just out on the table. And I suspect because the curator is not a quilter, he's not part of the quilt world. He's an art curator of artwork. The students that put the show together, they are part of an exhibit development class. They're not about quilt shows. They're not like, quilts happen to be the thing that they were working on. Elizabeth Talford Scott is the person that they were working on, but they don't have this connection to quilting the way that we do. That's like literally study. I'm an informal quilt scholar. I'm not affiliated with an institution. My organization is AQSG, and by that virtue, I'm an independent quilt scholar. So I have a little bit different knowledge than they do. So I think, they look at this book and it just is perpetuating this idea that, a quilt with this in it meant something. Now, I have no doubt that on the Underground Railroad, there might have been some type of thing like, you're looking for this house, and, the enslaved people there will hang quilts out if it's safe to come. I could see that being like reality, right? That makes total sense. But the fact that if it was this kind of quilt, that's the part that is just absurd. Let's see, but it also may be, hey, this is the right area of interest of a book. Let's put it down. And no one stopped to say, hey, should we read it? Yeah. There's a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of plausibility in some of the discussion about these, the secret story, these Underground Railroad quilts, but it's just not plausible what she describes, right? That's the piece of it that is unfortunate, and that people just keep perpetuating this. I really wish there was some way for us to find out, is this apocryphal information about, houses where the enslaved people might hang quilts to say, yes, absolutely. Eva, absolutely not even going to deny that. Stories hidden in quilts, that's the whole idea of African American story quilting. That's the whole idea there. But again, I'm going back to this Underground Railroad part. That's the part that's gross. I will not beat this dead horse. Jacqueline Tobin, let's never meet. Okay, so this is her obit. She died of heart failure, but unfortunately, for the last number of years of her life, I don't know if it was quite a decade, but the last number of years of her life, she was suffering from dementia. So I'll show you her last quilt in a sec. Time machine. Oh, this is a copy of her homegoing celebration. It has the Ode to Lizzie, Mama Lizzie, on here by Joyce. Had some pictures of her work. I mean, I think this was really nice. You get those little brochure things, when you go to a funeral. But I think this one was very nice. Like, really, looked at the fact that she was an artist. This is all the current stuff. This is all the stuff talking about the exhibition today. So what's really, really cool is the community celebration of this particular show has sister shows or events going on at all of these other institutions. So of the schools, we've got Coppin State University and Morgan State University. Those are both historical Black universities. And then you've got the BMA, the Maryland Center for History and Culture, the Peabody Library, and the BMA. Those are all together kind of in the museum district. the peel is down there too. And then the Decker is at MICA. That's the Maryland Institute College of Art. Jelma is Morgan State. And I'm trying to, what did I miss? Oh, the Reginald Lewis Museum of African American History. So all of these different institutions are doing something related to this quilt, or these quilts. I tonight am going to the Maryland Center for History and Culture for this stuff, the crazy quilt stuff. So that will be very exciting. I think Jelma, I'm pretty sure the guy is Morgan and not Coppin, but I met him. He was the one who, of the students that were there working on this project, he was the one that came and kind of like circled back to me and was like, tell me about quilts. And I was like, yes, sir, I could talk to you forever. So yeah, this is so very cool. And my goal is to get to all of them, but yeah. Well, that's the thing, Jill. I didn't realize until I really started reading, like pretty recently. They hung this before Christmas, but I just like could not get down there, all of this past month. So I didn't realize like the extent of the things that, were happening across these other museums. So this is another piece. This is a musical piece with spoken word that was very impactful to listen to. Unfortunately, like I said, I can't find any place where you can get the audio of it, but you can look at the transcript. Yes, Eva, they are pretty close together, like I was showing on this map. So like you could hit all of these. They're all within like walking distance of each other, particularly Maryland Institute College of Art, the Peabody, and Reginald Lewis Museum. Those are all like blocks apart. And then these others they're a little bit farther flung in the city. But yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing, like if you organized yourself well, you could hit all of these like in one day, spend a little bit of time. But the BMA has got the biggest show in specific to Elizabeth Talford Scott. This is her final piece. So you can see, the other ones that I was calling kind of the Spartan quilts. This is like everything you've already looked at all in one quilt, right? Jill, yes, I agree with you, Jill. I think that's the one thing I think here in Baltimore, that the art museums do collaborate quite a bit. And the Maryland Center for History and Culture, because of what their holdings are, anytime they do kind of stuff like this, that's sort of historical Maryland or a person of importance in Maryland, they get in there and collaborate with these other museums. And there's just a wealth of stuff here. You think about the Smithsonian, how the different museums or groups of the Smithsonian will collaborate with each other. It's like that here in Baltimore with some of these museums. And it looks like to me they're trying to do more of it, even with the college, the college galleries and stuff. But this one is also my favorite. This has just got so much going on. Like, I was gobsmacked. I didn't realize like this one was right at the end, like after you looked at all of the other stuff. So, I mean, oh, look at it. So beautiful. So fascinating to look at. It's called My Dreams. So, yeah. So it was more than 10 years that she did not create any work. And this one would have been created at the same time as her retrospective 25 years ago. So I don't know if this one was in it or not. I think it was, but I'm not positive. But like I said, this has got all the stuff from all the other quilts is in here. I mean, you can see some of these, like, they're figural kind of, and it's it's a little hard to tell in some of them. Like, is it just a bundle or is it a figural piece? You've got the stars have come back. The rocks are encased, in all kinds of different places. This thing must weigh a ton as well. um, yeah, this is super intricate, all the stuff. And I mean, these, I can see what you guys are seeing, like, on your screens. Um, I know it's mind blowing, but it's also not doing it justice for what we're looking at here. I don't know why, but these little, like, rice shaped beads, they kind of appear all over the quilt, but, like, she must have had, like, long strings of them, because she's used them in multiple places all over. And I liked here where you can actually see, like, she's kind of almost like tumbled the beads around each other and created these, like, kind of knots of beads. Whereas some of the other work, it literally, she's just using the beads as an outline. And, like, you kind of wonder, like, when you see an artist who, um, there was an artist whose work I saw at the Folk Art Museum in New York. And I want to say it was her last piece before she could not work anymore because of dementia. And, you kind of wonder, like, how much does a deteriorating, mental faculties impact, because you often hear folks that suffer from dementia, Alzheimer's, dementia, whatever, they often are, the symptoms are starting long before you realize, or, like, even before they realize. And so you wonder how much, like, would her deteriorating, capacity be impacted here or be reflected here or not, because she is working from this, like, childhood memories and, memories of her own child. And, you just, I don't know if it's something that could ever be, like, proven or, like, drilled down or really, like, accurately looked at. But you really wonder, like, what was in her mind in 1998 versus what was in her mind in 1979. And as an art quilter, she had a pretty limited career, because she was older when she started working on these. And I think this is, Elizabeth Scott is kind of a, she's the inspiration, like Grandma Moses, that, it is, like, it is never too late to become an artist, right? You know, right, Robin. Yeah. I hear that a lot from people. And, you do start to wonder, not just, like, not looking at behavior necessarily even, but, like, in creative decisions or, that kind of stuff. Because obviously day-to-day decisions, people that suffer from dementia, there's, like, forgetfulness, and then you have day-to-day decisions that are, can be problematic and harmful to them. But what about, like, what they're thinking, and if they have, ability to make things or, yeah. So why did she incorporate rocks? So she said, and this was something that was explained further in the Maryland Public Television piece, but she used rocks because she said, like, they're older than man, and they represent this, like, solid thing that you can count on. They represent strength. And and I don't know what religion she was, but I know my grandparents were Baptist, and a couple of comments she made seemed very Baptist to me. So I don't know if she was Baptist or not, but she talked about the Rock of Gibraltar, which, at least for Baptists, is one of those, like, I don't know what you would call it, like an iconic thing. So this was the final thing. This was at the end, and I think it's because I might have come in the exit. But this was at the other side as we were leaving, and this goes into you know, about this show. And I'll go ahead, I'll post this on, and I'll post a few things on the Cake TV Facebook page, because that's a public facing page. I'm not gonna like throw a lot on there, but I'll put some of this up there so you guys can read it. And then I went back and took more pictures of the Whatsits or the Whosits. So I think it was called Family of Whosits, something like that. Because I just love this thing so much. And I hate to call it a thing, but it really is difficult to tell what it is, like what the intention of it is. I feel like it's not intended to be a quilt. I really feel like it's intended to be like a cushion. So I will, of course, be revisiting. Okay, so I talked about In Plain Sight. That was a bummer at the end of the show. But what was totally, absolutely, terribly sad for me was I couldn't get the exhibition catalog. I went into at first I didn't even know if they had one. I assumed they did though, because there was definitely an exhibition catalog for the first show. So there had to be one for this one. So, you know, my kid and I are there for a couple hours, and then I was like, all right, I'm getting hungry. I'm getting cranky. Let's go home. And so we swung by the gift shop, and I saw the exhibition catalog sitting there on this little display of her, you know, tchotchkes that had her stuff printed on it. So I snagged that, and then they had a lot of stationery and little booklets and things, or not booklets, but like little sketchbook, notebook kind of things. So I got these. This is it's 8 note cards of these 4 designs, and you can see, I mean, they're ones that we just looked at, and they're the details. So I got these, and then I picked up this exhibition catalog. I go up to pay for it, and the girl's like, "Oh, well," and of course I made the mistake of first saying, is this the museum shop's like copy? Because there was only one there. And she's like, "Oh yeah, I can't sell that to you." I'm like, what? And she said, yeah, the curator, George Siskel, was there that morning checking in and saw that there's only one copy left and said they've ordered more. They're supposed to be there today or tomorrow. And I was like, really? And I thought to myself, well, I'm going down to the other museum, maybe. And I'm like, no, if I swing by there, they wouldn't have gotten them today. So I have to go back, but I will, because it is a really good exhibition catalog and I really want it. So it has a whole lot more information. So yes, tonight I'm going to see if they have it at the other museum tonight, but I suspect they have their own. Yeah, I will call to check before I go back down there. But there's a couple of other things I want to revisit at the museum. So, but I think this show has been so popular, that's why the catalog is sold out. But anyway, that was like my bummer at the end. I was like, I can't get the exhibition catalog. I mean, come on, this show is life changing. So, but I mean, overall, like I said, this was like the reboot of a retrospective from 25 years ago. And, you know, it was a student army that put this together. And I think they did a really incredible job. And I'm so excited to see, you know, what they've got at the other museums that are relevant to the show. Like I said, the one tonight at the Maryland Center for History and Culture is specific to crazy quilts. So I'm not exactly sure what to expect. And that show is literally opening, I think it's next week. So I'm a member of the Maryland Center for History and Culture, so I get like first look. So that's what tonight is. It's like a little reception to the opening of the show. So I don't know if they'll have anything of Elizabeth Scott's there. I don't know if it's going to be entirely crazy quilts or if they will have some reference to her. I don't know. We'll see. They have a lot of crazy quilts in their collection. So I'll be interested to see if there's anything I can match up to Dr. Dutton's pictures. Because they have a lot of like Maryland based stuff that, you know, just because they're basically the historical society. So yeah, my happy place crazy quilt. Yeah, for sure. So that is all so far. I hope that this has been an entertaining look at these things. I had an absolute ball there looking at her, all of her work, and it's so inspiring. And so much of it resonates with my own work. Um, it's, when you talk about like inspiration, I had never looked at her work this closely before. I mean, I'd seen pictures of it, but I'd never been able to examine it this closely before. And so much of it resonates with me and, what I do in my own work. That I'm almost like, did I see her stuff and like I've forgotten, and like I'm making these things inspired by her but I think that there's probably enough artists out there that do this kind of thing, like encapsulating found materials and adding them to textiles and that kind of thing. So I don't think that I copied Elizabeth Scott, but I just, in getting to see these things up close, I'm just like gobsmacked. Like, again, just, reminds me of the things that I kind of tell stories about in my own work. So, yeah, this was pretty amazing. So, it is a little after 4, guys, my time. I gotta go change because I don't think wearing a Guardians of the Galaxy t-shirt to this reception tonight is all that all that cool. So, as always, thank you so much, you guys. I love bringing this stuff to you, and I hope that you oh, why isn't it okay? Well, I mean, I don't think anybody would complain, but then again, I would feel like an idiot because people will be coming in there coming from work. So they'll be wearing, at the very least, business casual. And I'm currently wearing sweatpants and poofy slippers. So, in any event, I need to go brush my hair and put on acceptable outerwear to go to this event. And I will hopefully have more pictures for you on Monday. So, wonderful Friday Eve. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I look forward to seeing you on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern, if you can make it live. And if you can't, I hope you will join me and Jill on Tuesday night for quilt nerding. And yeah, I will see you guys soon. Mwah! And happy quilting. And Druid, I can't wait to see what you're making, even if it's just a little tiny snapshot, a little detail. Love you guys so much. You're the best. Mwah! I couldn't do this without you.